I'm so glad and pleased to be here, to be honest. I do these kind of things in many places in the planet, but this is like super organized. This is a very, very cool event, and it's been driven by the state, I guess, huh? All states should learn something about that, I guess. So I arrived yesterday. This is my first time to Wales. I'm pretty sure it's not going to be my last time, hopefully. Lovely country, but more importantly for me, I heard that you had a sense of humor. Let's see what kind of sense of humor you guys have. By the way, I'm a technical guy. My background is I studied computer science and mathematics, which means you can trust what I say. I'm not a sales guy. I'm not from marketing. But just to test your guys' sense of humor, do you know when you can see a sales guy's lying? Do you have that? When his lips are moving, huh? Isn't that how it works? But I'm going to tell you about authentication. And up here it says two-factor authentication, as I said in the slide before. That's like saying Betamax. That's old school. That's dinosaur. That's so much 2011. Nowadays it's called multi-factor authentication. Basically because you need more than two factors. You need multi-factors to ensure that a person is who he claims to be when he logs into a given system, because that's what we do. That's the simple part of authentication. I'm from SMS Passcode, and just to set it off, what we do is trying to create the best possible solution for that, to ensure that when a person is logging into a system, that he is who he claims to be. Just a bunch of things. We claim, like everyone else, to be the technology leaders. I don't find a single company in the world who doesn't claim to be technology leaders. We claim to be it as well. But I do think we can substantiate it in some way, and I will try to give you an insight to be able to pick and choose which one are the smart guys and which are not. Lots of countries. Very important, I think, is that we have a world-class support team. What does that mean? That means that if you run into trouble, there's people to call. And it's not like, anyone heard that one? When you try to get access to support, what the heck? So there will actually be people answering questions for you on the other end of the line. It's not only us who says that. Actually, that excellent support kind of thing came from the Gartner's Magic Quadrant, which we are proud to be part of. Lots of awards, lots of medals, lots of customers, lots of partnerships, and enough about that marketing bullshit. I have to say that because the tax system in Denmark works in that way when I travel, and I have to deduct my expenses. It has to be something company-wise. But authentication, you just saw all those slides telling that e-crime is accelerating. That's true. You see back, this is like in 2009-10, now there was like 1 million hits on phishing. Phishing is the term that covers what you're really afraid of when we talk about authentication. Phishing is like a general term which basically covers any way of getting information out of you, the stuff that you know. We phish the information out of you, and we use that information to be able to log in. For example, by phishing your username and password. The year after, it grew a bit, and then it grew a bit more. You see, it basically exploded. And it's nowadays, identity theft is considered to be the largest kind of crime in the planet. Why? Because nowadays, instead of taking on, I don't know what you do here in Wales, but taking a stocking over your head and go down to the bank and try to rob it, you can actually sit at home with pizza in one hand and a Coke in the other hand and actually commit crime and steal money from people, get value out of it, sitting in your home. Maybe in many places protected by a system that makes you into a hero if you succeed, basically. So that's what we try to do. But as you guys probably know, there will be no need for you and me. There will be no need for security if there are no bad guys. And security always goes hand in hand with a threat. So to be able to protect yourself against a threat and create the kind of security that is needed to protect yourself against, you have to understand it, as you probably will acknowledge as well. So no threat, no security, no threats. And there are the bad guys and the good guys. I belong to the good guy team nowadays. So, and they are coming, and you don't really know how they look, They look in all different kinds of shapes. and you have to be aware of them, and some of them hide better than others, I guess. But you have to be aware, of course. Let me show you this hacking demo, which I hope some of you have been waiting for, because essentially, when you have a login system, you want to make sure it's the person who you think it is who logs on. And the problem, you can say, is that this hacking demo I'm going to show you is going to be, that can be done by any 12-year-old kid. If you want to learn how to do it, go to YouTube, for example, and you just write phishing or farming or these different kinds of words, stealing passwords, and you will have probably a Russian hacker show you exactly what to do. Download this script here and do this and do that. Very often accommodated by some Finnish death metal or something. And I think that's part of the problem nowadays. That is the knowledge you need to be able to do hacking or to do e-crime is distributed very, very easy. So back in the good old days when we were real criminals, it was hard to get access to the kind of skills and knowledge you needed to be able to commit this. It was also somebody knew an IP address somewhere that you can get into, and then you can get a text thing, and you can look into that, and then you can see how you can battle a Cisco firewall or something. Nowadays, you just go and you Google it. And the problem nowadays is that, I said this could be done by any 12-year-old kid. The problem is that the 12-year-old kid don't have a filter. So he tends to do that. This is like, do you guys, how many in here uses Citrix? I don't have the voting kind of thing. Are there anyone using Citrix in here? Yeah. But this could be anything, by the way. But this is like a Citrix web interface, actually protected by multi-factor authentication. And not multi-factor, this is actually two-factor authentication. You have a username. Let's see here. And I have my very secure password. On top of that, I actually have a token. Do you guys know about tokens? Raise the right hand if you know about tokens, these ones here. Left hand if you maybe know about it. That was a joke. Laugh. But I have a token here, and when I press the button and I take off my glasses because I cannot really see it, there's no light in the back. You know, this is the old school kind of way. Then I push 23C6 31, and then I push login. This is 2011, huh? And let me see what happens. I just enter my username and password, and oops, I just got hacked. Just for your information, usually the bad guys are not writing that. They say the system is down for maintenance or something. But what really happened here is that I basically just stole the username and the password, and even the passcode sitting on this token here. Do you guys in Wales use this for your banking? Yeah, some does, some does. The thing I'm showing here is as simple phishing as it gets. What I did was I just made a copy of a website. Hey, I just got an email. Let's see how I got the same information. And if I had been a bad guy, which I'm not, nowadays I'm a good guy, then I would have all the information I needed to be able to log into your system. Huh? Although it was protected by multi-factor or two-factor authentication. And that's essentially the problem, okay? You got it? See if the Wales people are saying yes or no. Yeah. So that's phishing. And the problem with phishing in general, because there's many different ways of doing phishing. You explain this phishing email, where you get this email translated by Google Translate, and it says in some funny English, even more funnier than mine, please give me your credit card number and the expiration day and etc. Then we will check whether the security in our bank is good enough, kind of thing. And it's funny letters and stuff. And people is actually doing that. And the reason why they ship them out is because they actually get some value out of it. Otherwise, they wouldn't do it. In Denmark, we call them Kenya mails. And very often, people wonder, how come that there was like 3-5% or something who actually answered, yes, we have actually returned such an email. There's actually a reason for that. The reason is that there's a group of people who's just doing what they are told. All men knows that You probably know that. But there's some people who actually just do as they're told. And while you were doing that, I just thought about a study I wasn't actually planning to show you, but I'm going to show you anyway. That is saying is studying why does phishing works. It's like Harvard and Berkeley, big universities in this industry. And it actually says that there's 5% of all people just do as they're told. So if you, for example, send an email to my mom saying, hey, please enter your credit card information, and you just have a logo of the bank there, she most likely will do that. But then all of you sit there and say, but we are the smart people, huh? We are smarter than that. We will not fall for that. And I've worked in like IT security my entire life. That's all I do. I said, never ever is going to happen that David is going to be hacked. But then I read through that thing, and it actually says if you do it for sufficiently enough, if you make like a web page as I did, and it looks exactly like the original one, that's the phishing part. And then the hard part is to get the users over to that fake site. But you can do stuff there that would make it almost impossible for you to recognize. If you do that, that's a combination of something called phishing and farming. Look it up on YouTube. Then I fall in as well, and I actually did. And that is happening every day. And we are a lot of people who is trying to battle that, really. But there is actually a reason why phishing works. Some of it is due to technology. Some of it is just due to people's lack of common sense, you can say. Boom. So, what do you do to protect against Betamax? You thought you caught me. But it is actually multi-factor authentication. And there was like 1/3 of you guys who didn't know what multi-factor authentication and two-factor authentication was all about. So let me just try to explain to you what it is. The traditional ones was these tokens. And the problem is that the two factors usually is something, the one factor is the stuff that you know. Username, password, PIN codes, another password. Everything that's stuck within your head, that's the one factor. The problem with things that you know is that you might end up in a situation where other people also know it. But that's not a problem in itself. The problem comes when somebody else knows what you know without you knowing it. That's where a problem starts. And I have been in this industry for such a long time that I actually do remember the time before we had usernames even. I remember the time where you can say, but you just go and try, operate that system. You don't have a clue. The time when we get the usernames was when we had to like distinguish systems from one another to ensure that I didn't have, not necessarily because it was confidential data, but just because it was a mess, because the systems became so big, so I only wanted to look at my own stuff. When we started to get confidential data down there, we started to introduce passwords. But the problem with the password was, as you probably recognize, that if I have your username and password, and I have a billion different ways of stealing your username and password, like we just saw with the phishing kind of thing, then I can log on as you and compromise your data. So therefore, like 28 years ago, RSA, they came up with the idea of a token, which were the kind of like the one we just saw, as an additional factor to ensure that you are who you claim to be. And not that many technologies have lasted for that long. But the problem nowadays is that this two-factor authentication, based on that family of solution, the hackers know very well how to compromise that. But there's a bunch of different authenticators. The tokens were like the old ones, but then you have biometrics, fingerprints, iris scanning, typing rhythm. Apparently the way we dance is so unique that if you can scan it, you'll be able to identify people, at least me, I know. I've heard that many times. But that's one of the problems with, you can say, with security in general, we actually discussed that yesterday, is that if it becomes too complicated, or I think the right word is, if the system becomes too dependent on other systems or skills being present, the likeliness of the system working is very often, it's per definition less. The likeliness of the system working is less, and if it becomes too complicated, it's just not going to be used. And then people are going to find their way around it and stuff. So one of the major things, the school I came from, which is the University of Copenhagen, one of the first books you read there says something like this: the more systems your system is dependent on, the more likely it is that your system will not work. And the whole idea of SMS Passcode actually grew out of the fact that the likeliness of a person just remembering his token is less than the likeliness of a person remembering his mobile phone. But since it is a mobile phone that we use, we belong to that family of systems, then we can do stuff to increase the level of security. And you can say the dependencies you have is only that people will carry their mobile phone around, which is very likely to happen. So what is this authentication all about, really? All security, and I guess you will say the same, all security is to make it difficult for the bad guys to commit their crimes. Anyone who would say they'd make a complete secure system in the authentication space, you will know they are sales guys or marketing kind of guys. They would be lying. I usually say as soon as you create data, you are in problem. You are running into trouble. If you write data down, if you digitalize it, you are vulnerable, and you will have something that we call an attack surface, which means there's, if you like, think about the attack surfaces like, if you had to protect your house against burglars, your attack surface would be like your door and your windows. And if you're very historical, it would be the chimney and the walls and the basement, etc. All the different kinds of ways that the bad guys can sneak in. And that's the same here in the authentication. So one thing, when you have to ensure that the person is who he claims to be when he logs into your system, you can add this username and password. And of course, that will make it more difficult for the bad guy to sneak in. Another thing you can do is of course you can introduce a token and it will make it even harder. Then you can do something, and I'm not going to get too much into it, but there's different families of systems, you can say, in the authentication space. One of them is called a challenge-based solution. That's what we are. That basically means that the code which I get on a token, the code in our system will only be created if some kind of challenge is fulfilled. And the challenge we have chosen gives us the capability of seeing from where the user is logging on from which laptop he's logging on. So what we do, and that's when I translate it into my mom. That's called a session. When we log on in a SMS Passcode-based solution, a protected solution, when you log on, you can see right now you're logging on from this particular PC. Then we create the code and we link it to the PC. So the code that lands on your mobile phone can only be entered in through the PC that originally initiated the request. And without having to think too much about it, that actually eliminates the consequences of that kind of phishing you just saw. And that's essentially what you need. Some of the new stuff coming out, and which we support as well, is location awareness. I will show you that in a second, how it's done. But in some cases, we can see from which network that you're logging on from as well. So we see you're logging on from this PC, from this particular network. And then depending on where that network is, we can determine who is allowed to log on to what. And then there's a bunch of other things you can do. Behavior, who is it who logs onto which system, and in what time of the day he's doing it. And all of this, all of these different factors, that's why the word multi-factor comes in. All of these different factors just makes it harder for the bad guys to sneak in. But usually I say, as I said in the beginning, you shouldn't convince yourself that it is completely impossible. That's actually a picture of the best protected prison in Denmark. It's a prison without walls. It had walls, but without windows and doors. And basically, we just threw the criminals over the wall, and then we threw some food into them once in a while, and hope they stayed in there. But at the end of the day, it's just a matter of having a big enough bulldozer. Then you can crack down even the thickest walls. They might have been. They could have built them higher or thicker, and then you might need a tank or something. But eventually, if the bad guys want to sneak in, they do that. I think, in my opinion, the biggest hack ever done was done in 2011 when RSA, they got their seed file stolen. You know, the seed file, in my opinion, the seed file, that is like the best protected piece of data, or should be at least some of the best protected data in the world. The seed file is the mother of all codes on all their tokens. And that's RSA, which is a company I really dearly love because it is actually a super, super cool company. Is the biggest security software vendor of the world, I guess. But they still got the seed file stolen. And it's actually not to pick on RSA. It's more to say that if the bad guys want to get hold of that, they do that. The seed file, in comparison, for me, it's like what do you call it? The crown jewels of the British Queen. How likely is it that you can steal it? That is probably protected by MI5 and MI6 and James Bond and Spider-Man. Everybody's watching that thing, huh? But still, they were capable of getting hold of it. Some of the new stuff I think you can think about during today, because we're going to talk about bring your own device and cloud computing, all these kind of things. And I think one of the interesting part is that what we saw there was some bad guys was able to steal something from somebody else that put somebody else into trouble. Huh? So somebody stole some stuff from a vendor, which put their vendor, this particular vendor's customers into danger. And that's not only RSA, by the way. Everybody who runs in that family of solutions or different kinds of solutions run into that kind of trouble. The same in cloud computing. Basically, you have to put your trust and security to somebody else. And one question one might ask today is that, are we really much better off using a cloud computing-based solution? I don't have the answer for it, but at least the idea is this consolidated thing that we can buy one big firewall instead of having a bunch of small firewalls. But on the other hand, if we crack down that one big firewall, we will get access to a bunch of customers, which might make it more interesting for the bad guys. But there's at least in that thing, there's a bunch of new questions coming up. But let me show you guys how our solution works and how it can be done. This is a Citrix web interface as well, just like the other one. And the way it works is like I type in my username and my password and press enter. Then a lot of magic is happening downstairs in the basement in the servers. We basically send out a text message. It just came here. You see it? See all the small letters? So here. And since I'm the only guy in the world who has this particular mobile phone number, I know it's me when I log in. It's basically as simple as that, but let me show you how that code really looked like. I actually took a picture of it, and it looked like this. Because I haven't logged on many times from this particular network, it says it's a non-trusted location. It's not, has nothing to do with Wales, by the way. It's just that I haven't logged on. We do trust Wales. It seems like a very trustworthy place. But it's in the United Kingdom. I don't know if you all agree on that. And the name of the network here, the name of the network is this Venue Simrus kind of thing. Was that wrong? So actually, I could, and it's not all vendors who, we basically, to be able to do that, we need, and Cisco, by the way, who's talking later, they actually support this by telling us from where the end user is logging on from. And based on that, we can make different policies saying this particular group of users is allowed to log on from here, and this particular group of users is allowed to log on from there. So that's how it works, and that's called a location awareness, and therefore we are capable of saying, depending on what you try to access and where you come from and who you are, we can determine how the login scenario should look like. This is not done by marketing. If they see that, and of course now it's live streaming to, was it like 150 million around the world? So maybe our marketing department is seeing that. But essentially this is what we can do in some cases. And you can say that the technologies that we are protecting are more and more focused on doing stuff like this. And that is dividing the world into good places and bad. You see, we are happy, smiling faces up here. We are the good guys. Australians are good, but you never know. This is the Chinese guy. You never know with the Chinese, but like you don't. The Americans, they can be good, but they can also be bad. Huh? So depending on that, we can divide into which systems are allowed to be logged on from where. This is actually a live screenshot from one of our from a live customer really. When you talk about security in larger organizations, and by the way, we do support very, very small organizations, 2, 3, 4, 5 users, up to hundreds of thousands of users. Our system actually supports the entire range of different kinds of sizes of different verticals and different businesses. This is actually one of our customers. When you talk about security and crime in general, you always try to gather as much information as you can to be able to do stuff differently. And if you talk the large organization, they might be so big that they have their security officer, a CISO, a security officer. And the CISO, he always wants to collect information so he can do different things. He can change some stuff. He can buy new systems and put in new stuff into a server room. And this is one of the things one can do, and I think we're probably going to see more and more of. This, as you probably, I don't know if you can see that, but there's a bunch of blue dots here and yellow and red ones. And all the dots basically represents places where people log on from. And when you push that, you can see who it was who logged on to what. And that's not really, really interesting. What is really, really interesting is to see who tried to log on to what and from where. Because the ones who tried and didn't succeed in it could be the bad guys. And then you can make a landscape, really, that people who is trying to authenticate from places and not succeeding could be the bad guys, and then you can basically block them out. Comprende? Turning back to some of the other kinds of solutions that people used to have and think about, there's a lot that you can say that the trend in general was in a period that we should go biometrics, for example, the fingerprints kind of things. But I think the important part, and some of the important part to keep in mind, is this dependency kind of thing. That's kind of like a mantra within SMS Passcode as well. We will never try to do anything just for the marketing bullshit kind of thing. We will only do stuff that we really know we'll be able to put into action. And if you take like the biometrics, the problem in general with biometrics is that you are dependent on there being a scanner sitting out there. You need a fingerprint scanner to be there. It has to be distributed. You need to have drivers for it. You need to ensure that it's updated. You need a system to be able to feed that information you get and compare it to something else. And the reason why that never really picks up is because you are too dependent on too many other things to be sure that the system will run in a proper way. That was actually all I had to you guys, unless you wanted to have some, but I think we should take the questions after the sessions, correct? So then we will be able to pick up in time, I guess. But thanks for listening, and I will be sticking around, cracking some Danish jokes if you need that. So please feel free to come down to the exhibition area and talk to us, and then we can show you a bit more. But thanks for listening.